It's my bad. Okay. Yeah. So we're just going to review the macros now that you guys typically run each time. So opening up the adds macro first, all these are the error. An add factor is an error term on a stochastic equation. If you remember your school courses. So every equation in the EQN file that is defined by the Stokes, I've lost my, one sec here. I have way too many files open. Just give me 1 second, please. Right, so every stochastic equation in this model is going to have an equivalent add factor, or else the system wouldn't run. So that's what you get in here, and everything is set to 0. So every single variable has the same stuff. The update commands, as you can see, they're back at 2009 because we just simply don't use this method. They're also commonly called amongst modelers fudge factors. What they do is just push your model, your levels around by precisely what you set them at, of course. So if you're looking to get $5 billion in additional consumption, for example, in say 2020, well, of course, has to be in a solution year, you can do that. You can just prop the consumer expenditure level up by $5 billion by adding a 5,000 to the C, to one of these components, of course, like CD, CDOMN, whatever you want here. So that's what they're for. So typically, the only time we actually use these is for the inventory adjustments, which are the VCBs in this case. You can't see this because my stuff's off the screen here. So say you wanted an inventory, a $5 billion inventory accumulation, for example, you would do something like that in 2020. But that's really what you do with them. Just generally use the update statements and set them. Allows you to push things around a bit because you may have noticed the inventory equation does not have a Z variable in it here on the right-hand side to make those adjustments. So we would just typically adjust the level. The error term is invisible on these equations. You're not going to see it off to the side here. It's just there, and it's there because this is a stochastic equation. So that's what add factors are for. Next macro we can look at is the EX1. So we call this the DEM macro for the demographics. So anything demographic related is typically found in this macro. So again, you're going to have macro parameters for dates. So we know that we have the population data updated in this model up to 2020. Probably not in the one I sent you. We'll have to send you guys a new one if you want, or you can wait till January. So we're extending basically the common extension date range is 2021 and on, because population, all demographics end in 2020 with the most recent release at the end of September, I believe. The births data, again, we're looking at, this is using the births by age of mother data, so it was a bit behind, there's a bit of a lag there, so that's 2020 and on. And then we have the net migration shares. So what we do here is we just extend it 1 year and then another, but these will be set up. You guys will never have to play with these unless you start messing around with population updates in your model. So you may end up working with them, but you typically just the best way to deal with it is just to grab that variable and then look for it, see what it's doing. And you can see for the first year, we take a moving average. The past 5 years on the migration shares. That's so that we have some stability in the proportion of people coming in by age. And then under that DNMS2, for example, we then extend that smoothed out value that we just estimated there. So that's all that kind of stuff is doing. On the households, we have the headship rates already extended out to 2019, so we're extending them on. And this one says don't change this date, but it's the same type of concept. And this is looking at the structural share stuff. Also the education participation rate that I showed you, trying to account for the current spending shifts based on the school age population. So moving down this file here, standard stuff. We're always going to have a close open up the model history database. You notice there's no F on this because it is not the forecast base we're going to be writing to in this case. Set your frequency. We then take the emigration rate. So emigration, in most years, you can just extend the rate last year. So that's the number of emigrant, it's an emigration to population ratio. That's what this is. Typically, you can just extend it and you come out with a very good estimate because it's relatively stable if you're familiar with the emigration numbers. In this case with COVID, we had emigration as well as immigration drop significantly. So here I have a note saying that the rate was actually that 0.005, but what we did is we tuned for the 2020 numbers, making the assumption that we'll see international travelers pick back up again, and you'll gradually see it phasing back. We did sort of a quick phase back initially in the first 2 years, and then continuing to trend upwards back to the original, the old rate. So that helps us tune directly the immigration numbers. So you can, if you're ever interested in what these are doing, just copy the variable, go into the EQN file, and then just search it. Oop, I just grabbed Ontario for some reason. There you go. So as I said, it's a share of your last year's population. Okay. So other than immigration, you can also have your proportion of female births. We're assuming, of course, that they stay constant here compared to last year, as they are relatively stable with, I think, females or males being born slightly more frequently than females. On the non-permanent residents, so same stuff. You can impose, I have the 2020 numbers already updated in the one I'm looking at here, so we can impose where we think non-permanent residents are going to go in the next few years. So these are the CNPR numbers, and we put them at 800 people and then 1,200 people before they flatline around 1,000 people per year as we're tuning into the long run here. And those numbers you should be able to see in the key table. Where are we? Oop, way back in time here. So there you go. There's your 800, 1,200, and then 1,000. So we don't, non-permanent residents are obviously highly cyclical. I'm not sure what you guys do with your forecasts on that component, whether you try to impose that cyclicality, because of course they come in the good times, and then they're all kicked out when things go poorly. So that's generally how you would impose those numbers in this case. Interprovincial migration. So we have the ZDNIPM variable. Now this is basically calibrated for the long run, but then we have to tune it. We like to tune it at least over the decade for the published forecast, so that we can sort of really balance labor markets if we need to, or you just have a sort of a story about where population flows are going to go. You would use these adjustment factors to drive the interprovincial equation above and beyond what's happening on the differential in the relative employment rates, right? Looking at tighter labor markets relative to the rest of Canada and so forth. So sometimes that needs some work. The other issue in Manitoba model's case is what is the normal rate, right? Given that the normal rate of unemployment is more of a theoretical concept, it's hard to pin it. I think we've fixed yours at 5% right now, and it may actually be coming up a bit. So,
I've seen that 8 years ago, 5%.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've been looking at that, but we set it in our national model so that it doesn't get overwritten. And you can see there the 5% seemed to make more sense in the early 2000s, where you'd have the rate cycling above and below. But again, it has been trending up clearly in the past few years, and then here's COVID going up to about 8% in our forecast right now. So we can let what we do is we run what's called a Hodrick-Prescott, an HP filter on the historical UR. And if we were to do that, you would see this sort of cycle and run through it more like a trend line. But if we were to do that, all you're going to have to do is recalibrate your NIPM value here to bring the story back to where you like it. So that's really the issue there. And it could cause, you're basically looking at a bit of for some of the equations, a bit of recalibration required if you start to mess with that rate right now. But for now, we're just holding it at the 5%, assuming that you guys will tighten up again. I think a lot of this, a lot of your province has been coming off the kiosk and that kind of type of stuff in the past several years. So it's been a bit of a weakness in investment that's having some multipliers as well, and seeing some interprovincial outflows and that kind of stuff. But generally, this is how you would tune your interprovincial flows using this variable. Immigration, same concept. You also have a Z variable on it. And the way we deal with this using our national system, as I said, we try to balance Canada as a whole with immigrant numbers. So they will pick up if the Canadian unemployment rate tightens. And the assumption is that you essentially would get your share of those numbers. But if you don't like these things, what we have in our current forecast that we provide you, these are actually a level adjustment in the immigration equation. So if I go look at that model again. So here we're taking, this is all level adjustment. If you look at this, this is outside the bracket. So this takes the Canadian rate, and then you get a per capita share, sort of an employment-based share you can see here. Then to also take some lag on the what you got previously in here, and then you can augment that or reduce it, whatever you like, however it works, however you want it to look like. Excuse me. I'm just going to bring this forward. So in this case here, we're pulling the level down a little bit in 21, and then we're saying it comes back gradually. So this is these units are, that's 150 people per year. We're pushing it up by 150, another 100 people, and then 50. So pretty small numbers that we're making the adjustments for, but we're just trying to get that those immigration levels pushed into the right direction. One sec, I'm just going to change my historical date range so I don't have to keep doing that. Yeah, so you guys didn't fall off too bad. I mean, you actually had a pretty successful summer, as I recall. So it didn't affect your numbers so much as other places. We've seen 20% drops in the levels relative to last year. So your stuff wasn't so bad, and then here we are. We're just pushing it up a little bit, trying to give you a few more immigrants going forward. But I assume you guys would maybe just be imposing these levels from Tara's work for your forecast. So that's of course up to you how you do that stuff. Okay, so next we have our fertility probability stuff, and sometimes we have these tuned. What this is really about is the demographics table. You're just trying to make sure that the crude birth rate remains relatively stable in the first year here, which it is in this case, from known history to the first forecast year. But you can tune your fertility probabilities, and we actually break these apart. If you just highlight them, you can see which age groups they're affecting in general. So you sort of the younger ages, the middle ages, and the higher ages here, and how you want to tune those. Same thing with mortality probabilities. You get the same type of adjustments you can make, and we typically don't make them unless the crude death rate is seeing some sort of a jump in its transition from history to the future forecast year. And in this case, again, it's not. You see your 8.2, 8.2 each year. So no adjustment was required on them. Besides mortality, so we get down here, we get into the headship rates a little bit here. This is what I was talking about, how we look at the trend for some of these guys. I don't know if I have a table on headship rates to show you. I do not, but what we can look at is the DHHRs. Ooh, I should give you a table. Here, I'll just have to pick them out. 1524. No, wrong one. Okay, so again, we can look at 5 things at once, 5 series at once here. So it's good to bring some history up when you're looking at headship rates. Maybe give a third decimal there. And you know, I take the 1524 off. It's skewing the chart. So this is some of the stuff we've been doing here, looking at where these headship rates are going, where they could trend into the future. So this will drive your age shares on the number of households that are being estimated here. So this is what I was talking about, where we've seen some major transitions occur on affordability factors pushing different unit types. This is the aggregate headship rate in this case, and our models are actually running off the structural type stuff. So, but you can still look at these headship rates by structural share, and then you can make adjustments to them. So this is what I was talking a bit about, how we set midpoints and interpolate in between them. So here we have the 15 to 24-year-olds. What we do here is we say calculate for the forecast period, set all values to NA, meaning it's just how forecast year works. You can then set the 22 value at 7% and assume, obviously we're assuming that it will pick up over time, going up to 8.5. And then when you get down below, there's a command called NA interpolate. NA interp in this system, right at the bottom. And this will do a linear interpolation for all the unknown years. So any year where there's an NA being set, it will then give you a linear interpolation to those midpoints that we're setting here. So that's all we're doing. And we review this every year or two. We didn't have jumps in the last known history year on the headship rates. So that is all controllable within this macro here. And then we have, these are more the owner structural shares. We don't really play with those as much. And we also have the school age participation rates. So this data historically comes from Statistics Canada. So basically just, it's looking at how many of each age group within a province are attending either, some type of public institution, school system, or private for that matter. And we just assume that these typically stay constant, as they are relatively stable going forward. So that's all this is. Okay, we can move into the next one now, unless there's any questions there. So the EX2 adjust, we call it. So this has a whole bunch of different types of adjustment variables in it. And you'll see the list at the top here. So we deal with, this is where we're making adjustments to our consumer spending, our actual housing starts, and the residential investment numbers. You can also adjust price stuff in this, a bunch of prices and user cost adjustments. I'm not sure if these are in here anymore. The inventories, I think this may be a bit of an old list, but you'll go down and get familiar with it here. So same stuff. We have our version control. You'll see in every macro, all our date parameters that we're using. So basically, you can just look at these and see what they are for. Extend FKSF variables. So obviously, in this version of the model last year, we knew was it 2018 provincial economic account. Same stuff. Once the January version comes out, these are both going to be 2020 and on. This table one is it's irrelevant. It's just setting a date range at the end of the file so that you can view your table dates, or you can view tables under that date range, I should say. And the LFS, of course, we don't know 2020 yet, nor with the housing starts. In this case, we didn't. This might be at a date actually, or no, these are imposed. Sorry. Here. Okay, so things in here. We have things like total factor productivity. So this will mess around with your investment equations. I wouldn't touch that. You can instead tune the investment by manually, which you'll probably be doing anyways. For the expenditure components of GDE, we start with consumption here. So this you may recognize is kind of like the investment. What we have here, these are all the final Z variables for all those spending categories that I showed you in the model. Now, the way we sort of layer these adjustments, so there is an aggregate adjustment. So you can just, bring everybody up or down. So that's why the ZC gets into every single one of these final Z variable adjustments. That you can then go and modify either all the durables together, all the semi-durables, or sorry, that's only one of them, all the non-durables together, or all the services together. So that's all this is about, is layering. And as you can see, we don't even touch this middle group here. So we go and we instead adjust each category by hand. So there's a big drop on the motor vehicles. This was obviously not working very well. And on the other durables. So basically you're tuning all of your consumption categories here. So if I open up the consumer 2 table, geez, I lost my date range again. Go. So you're breaking apart the motor vehicles. We think these are going to come down. So you're really just telling your consumption story. This has never been like this before. This is a really unique situation with COVID. Typically, the model equations do a pretty good job of getting these adjustments, whereas in this case, with this year, the way things are going, and mandatory closures of businesses, we've had to hand tune these and guide them a bit by the retail sales data, monthly retail sales data, and also the in the case of motor vehicles, we have sales data on motor vehicle purchases in the province. We had that for every province, so. That's essentially what we're doing, using these ZC variables to make adjustments and then make our recovery story as well. Because there are some moving averages on some of this stuff, it sometimes requires massive adjustments to get it back and produce that recovery because there was such a strong drop in 2020 in the case of some of these. So you just really have to play with it.
I have a dumb question. I noticed like your first year that you're tuning, it says 2019. Is it actually using that, or does it bypass it because everything else is essentially solved for 2019?
Correct. If we knew 2019 was filed, because these are stochastic equations, you could put in numbers back to 2010. It wouldn't matter. They wouldn't get adjusted, right? Okay. And I'll show you that in the solution system how this all works. You know about the do not solve lists, David, right? So that happened in this system. What a do not solve list is, it just says do not solve this variable because we know it historically. And I'll get to that once we get past these macros. But yeah, we'll circle back. How about we do that?
Aaron, sorry, can I also ask a quick question?
Of course.
So just in the aftermath of COVID, and you've kind of spoke to some of the challenges with forecasting those impacts and the recovery as well.
Yes.
Do you ever assume that there will be some structural changes as a result of something like COVID moving forward?
We do, in some cases, yes. Whether, a lot of these are bets at this point in time.
Totally, yeah.
You can make those adjustments directly through here. Whether we start refitting the consumer spending equations a few years out from now, whether it's even necessary, it may actually become problematic and cause, future issues, because once COVID gets in the rearview mirror, things may just go back to normal. I certainly assume we'll have some differences in some cases for, industries that continue to work at home. Clearly, companies have found efficiencies and that kind of stuff. That may make some changes here, but yes, the idea here is that you would just make these adjustments, or you could control for them at the very least using these Z variables. Okay, So what I really want you guys to get out of these macros is, where is everything located? If I want to tune consumption, where do I go? That's, I think, one of the key points for this, going through these files. That'll the best takeaway you can get out of it, is particularly for guys that want to tune the forecast. Okay, so next, again, we have things like nonprofit institution adjustments. Here's your retail sales, CRS, we call it. In this case, again, yeah, retail sales is known historically. I'm not, these are on, but these are not doing anything because it's a stochastic equation historically. So it may be that sometimes our forecasters just leave the old adjustments on so that they can see what they had before, right? Because they know it's not going to affect the known history. So next section here, after consumption, most of the consumer spending categories is your housing. So it's generally in order, somewhat like the model here. So we have our housing start adjustments. In Manitoba's case, these are all set at 0. In some provinces, now this speaks to how the formation numbers were. Your province doesn't seem to have any issues with, well, I mean, I know it doesn't. The urban sprawl, for example, around Winnipeg, you guys have lots of prairie land. You have lots of land. There's not really any geographic restrictions. Our singles being, you may be getting more of a push for urbanization and planning rules on apartments within the downtown core, but possibly not so. Whereas you got lots of land on the outskirts of town where they can push new single development. So what I'm getting at is, in places like British Columbia and Ontario, we have large permanent negatives on these numbers, whereas we'll have large permanent positives on these numbers. So it doesn't matter if on a formation basis people demand more apartments, or sorry, more singles. In an ideal world with unlimited space, we may demand more singles, but the municipalities simply won't let us build them. And that's because there's such housing shortages in some provinces. So what we end up doing is putting, we're trying to tune the general long-term trend with these variables right here. Overall, we would then tune our short-term forecasts with these adjustments using the update command version. So in this case, we're just, we're collecting the monthly data on single starts by CMHC and the apartment starts and all that kind of stuff. And then we're going in here and pushing the investor as 2 table here, pushing the level of starts around basically to get what we think we're going to land at for the end of the year. We're then also looking at where are we going to go next year, based on what, like what kind of factors are at play here. The housing market, like investment, a lot of sentiment attached to where the numbers move. Interest rate effects are, of course, are all built into the equations and that type of stuff. And then the fundamental drivers like population and formations are all built in there too. But there are, of course, other factors at play, like what are your vacancies at? Is there a ton of slack in the market? Are people moving out of rentals, and you're getting all kind of vacancies on that side that may push the apartments forecast around, and that kind of stuff. So we're really digging in our housing forecast and looking at the current trends in the province to drive this story and come up with these numbers that we're working on here. So, but essentially, if you do have views on your housing market, other than what we're providing you in the initial forecast, this is where you would make these adjustments. Next, we have the residential investment component. We mostly just let the residential investment equations run for themselves, run by themselves. You can see these are historical numbers, adjustments. So the 20 and on has nothing on it. But not in the renovation case. This has been a very unique year where we've had surges in very large increases in expenditures on home renovations, and that's because everybody's stuck at home. So it's been a real special year in that case. Some provinces, sometimes there's a renovation tax rebate or some other type of rebate to stimulate the residential construction sector. So you can make these types of adjustments on the reno aspect. And if you are, we do a lot of stuff in the construction industry, as Thomas saw in my presentation. But you can see that the reno component is very significant here. 1.7 billion out of the 3.8 billion in total residential investment. So it tends to make up almost half of some of the provincial residential investment markets. And this table is wrong. That's 2012 millions. So don't believe that. We have to fix that one.
That was a mistake before too.
Right. Yeah. It's somehow the wrong table's been copied in, because these are all correct in most provinces. I will make a note. We'll make sure these are all fixed for you. This is where we go back to version control issues, and sometimes somebody grabs a copy of the model from the wrong spot. Okay. But again, this is the same type of stuff. ZIRC variables, investment, residential construction. That's what it stands for. And then you'll get your singles, single detached row houses, apartments, and the other new dwellings as well. And then the reno component, and then other, which and there's also transaction costs up here. So you can go in here, throw in an update command. These are percent change or percent adjustments. They're not one for one, but they're very close. You just have to play around with them when you're tuning your forecast. So typically we would just make the adjustment, run it, see what you get. Is that what I want? Maybe not, maybe yes, run it again. If not, make another little adjustment to get there. So this is in the potential starts component now, that what I was talking about with that net demolition rate and the housing vacancy rate. So we do look at this stuff. There is some data on StatCan where you can see these kind of things. Now, of course, the demolitions, they sort of go up and down quite a bit. But generally, I think we've captured the trend component with this 0.1% of the housing stock being demolished per year. And on the vacancy rate, assuming that you get about 0.8% of the stock needs to be vacant to have a functional market. So again, these are assumptions you can play with if you're interested. And this is that other component I talked about with to represent the urbanization trends, things like that, intra-provincial migration. So you can put, I think this is a level adjustment. So you could say that maybe we need an extra 1,000 units in the city of Winnipeg for the next couple of years, and you could then just put in like an update command here, PHS and 2020, say 1.1, that kind of stuff. Not sure why I'm getting this color problem here, but that's how you would deal with that. You could assume that formations go up a bit. It's one way of doing it, but to get it all, you may just want to adjust the actual start levels, that type of stuff instead, and just bypass the whole potential estimate. Okay, there's some other components here on just transfers. We're typically not really playing with that, assuming that the ratios stay constant, unless you guys have some deep views from your counterparts, Narendra's group or whatever. You may not be playing with much with that stuff. What else we got here? Real cost of funds. Don't bother messing with this stuff. It's just about, it just messes with your investment really, and the cost of capital, that kind of stuff. You can make adjustments on your user costs as well. We typically tune this a bit, so I wouldn't really play with these too much. And it goes back to that cost model. We're just trying to calibrate things back to normal, because the cost model will generate cost impacts, but again, that can kind of go back to how much of these costs are being passed on and so forth. And do we have good representation on user cost growth? So we typically look at this each round and line these up for you. Try with the goal of trying to keep them within about 1.5% to 2.5%, because you don't want costs moving, going nowhere or skyrocketing over time. But as you can see here, these are very minor adjustments of 0.2% and stuff like that. Okay, what else we have? See the RDs, these are just depreciation rates. Nobody ever plays with any of this stuff. Statistical discrepancy, so this is just taking historical computed residuals and then extending them out in the future. You don't want to mess with that stuff. So for the price, the final demand prices, we have this section here with all the ZPs. So you can either make an aggregate price adjustment where you bring all prices up or down equally. And sometimes you'll be tuning this. When you get that quarterly economic account data, you probably want to go after these individually. In that case, so we would do that with all these update commands down here. Possibly the durable prices should be higher or lower. So you can make these types of adjustments in this case. Same thing with your exports and import prices. Now, if you're familiar with corporate profit estimates in this system, economic models, of course, they have to rely on where's my variable here? I want just 1 second. Oh, sorry, I meant OSB. That's what I want. Okay. Now, if you're familiar with the nominal side of the accounting framework, corporate profits are a residual from your. So you have your net domestic income, which is basically your, really largely driven by your nominal GDP estimate, and then you have your consumption of fixed capital and your taxes less subsidies. So given that these two are really small components and relatively stable, fixed capital consumption allowances tend to not really move at all. You're really talking about how would you tune up corporate profits in this case? Say you wanted your corporate profits to be higher. The only way you can do it is by raising net domestic income or really lowering labor income. These two components, the mixed income, and this is a statistical discrepancy, which is not to be touched. So, and this is such a really negligible component that you're really just trying to balance how much is labor making and how much is nominal GDP in this case. So what you can do, one of the best ways to deal with that, if you wanted to perhaps say raise corporate profit levels, and why don't we make a quick adjustment and I'll show you how that would work. So I come into the key analysis table here. So we have our net operating surplus on corporations at the bottom of the income section, which is right at the bottom of the table here. So we are assuming about a 16% in corporate profits this year. It might be significantly more, but the way to reduce that more, of course, is to either boost your labor income, and you would do that, given that we're happy with our employment forecast, you would say, do I want to boost the wage rate? Given that we have monthly wage data as well, we probably have these two numbers pretty good, particularly a forecast for the end of the year like we're in right now. So I'd assume that our labor income estimate is pretty good. So it's clearly going to be an issue more with the net domestic income, which means you're looking at the nominal components of all of GDP. So unless you have your quarterly account data, which is actually telling you which one's off in this case, a quick and dirty way of tuning it is to deal with the export and import price deflators. Why have I lost this? There we go. And that's what you're seeing here. In this case, we're lowering it. So say I was to let's just take a copy of that line. And let's lower that by 1% instead. So now I'll jump ahead here and show you how I'm going to run the model. But I'm just going to run that macro EX2. And then I'm just going to run the ASOL, which is the solution file. Okay. So you can see there, by lowering net domestic income or lowering nominal GDP in this case through the price deflator, I've now reduced my corporate profits. So that's kind of the concept of what you can do here. I'm not saying that the exports are the absolute clearinghouse in any way, but without knowing some of that quarterly account information, you wouldn't typically know what to do. But this is sort of the concept here, how you can play with the final demand prices to ultimately tune your nominal GDP growth or levels or whatever you like there. So moving ahead, we also have the wages income components in here as well. And typically we're not playing with this stuff too much. We let the equations work based on interest rates and capital stock and so forth. This is the farm, non-farm, and the rental income and property income, things like that. We do have wage rate data, hourly wage rate data, so collected on a monthly basis, so we can make adjustments on this stuff directly in this section. What else would we play with here? Also, your hourly numbers. These are your average weekly, average weekly earnings. Where's the hours? Sorry, the hours are the LAWH here. So if you know that, for example, through COVID, we all know that a lot of hours were cut. Not necessarily, people weren't necessarily laid off, but we saw a lot of hours being reduced as per the data that's available on a monthly basis in the LFS. So you can make these adjustments here to the hourly equation. So moving into the model. So here's your LAWH equation. So here you're making adjustments to the Z variable. That would get into here, and this gets into your sort of payroll component, which is down below here. So by lowering those hours, you're going to affect the productivity and so forth, and you're going to adjust employment slightly as well. So it's there's a bit of a dynamic effect there when you make these types of adjustments, and you'll have to play around with it to get an idea of what's happening there. Okay, back to this. As well, you have your labor force participation rate numbers. So again, this is a stochastic equation, so that 19 number is not being used. But we had to, given that the unemployment rates skyrocketed this year, you can see that the part rate equation was looking for a crash, and clearly the modeler, in this case, a guy named Brett in my office, is pushing the part rate up, trying to offset that, because as soon as we saw a general reopening of the economy and sort of the CERB funding was removed, people began participating again. And we're seeing, we have that in the monthly data. So this is where you would adjust your part rate through the ZLFPR. The ZLP is your source population numbers. Typically, it's pretty good on its own. So you rarely see very large adjustments on this stuff because we are getting the demographic model so detailed. So we're talking about, age groups 15 and over here in that case, and it tends to get a pretty good estimate for the year. But if you do need to make a minor adjustment, which we like to do because we like to get it right on for our forecasts, and you can do it through this component here. Again, I'm not sure why this is even in here, but here's the setting of the normal unemployment rate, the URN, or the natural rate in this case. Okay, so last section in this file is the participation rate by age group for the labor market. So this is where we're able to, much like those headship rates, looking at trends in headship in the demand for housing, we're looking at trends in the participation for the different age groups for males, and both males and females here. So you can see, for example, the 65 and over age group, we are looking to trend that up rather than flatline it at what was produced in 2019, from the 2019 number. So we instead set these trends. If you guys have strong views on this stuff, of course, you're certainly welcome to make any adjustments you like. But if I pull these numbers up, for example, so there you go. So you clearly see that the males, I mean, these are amazing, the part rate increases over the past 20 years. So here we are in 2020, you know, you're up at 23% almost, high 22s, and there used to be only participation from 13% of the population in that age group. So incredible stuff. But what we're trying to do here is account for this trend continuing. And then where could it possibly level off, or will it ever level off? Or are people going to live till they're, 120 or something, and they're going to have to be working as over the age of 100 or something like that? So that's all we're trying to do here, is look at these individual age groups by 10-year age group and by gender, and make assumptions about where these trends are going to go in the future. We then set, this is much like that, using that any interp concept, that interpolation method. So we're setting these midpoints, but here, if you look at this 4 list, we're actually setting all the unknown years to NA first. So we plug them in as NAs. We set a few values in the mid years, and then as we get to the bottom here, we run this 4 list, which is then interpolating all those midpoints. So that's all that is happening down here. Okay, let's move to the next one here. The EX3. So we call this the rest of world macro. Most of the stuff in here, this is where you're going to play with, if you want to change the energy price assumptions, interest rates, the exchange rate, things like that. Most of the stuff that's read in here is read in from the Canadian model. So here we're looking at the only databases you can see that are being opened or set as macro parameters are the provincial aggregate macro. So that's going to be reading in information from all the other provincial forecasts that we give you, and also from it's called the CAP database, which is the P is actually like an F, so it's like our Canadian forecast base. Think of it that way. So you go down here, what kind of stuff do we have? These are just switches on federal carbon tax. You don't have to worry about that stuff because I control it in the Canadian model, unless you're doing some type of modeling on the federal rates. Next, here's where you get all the raw material price indices, the producer price indices. So these are all coming from our Canadian system. As you can see, this is a concatenation statement with the concatenate there. So that is just saying go into the Provag database and grab that variable. So after the prices, we have assumptions about U.S. growth.
Sorry, I had a question about some of those. Is that like some of the stuff that we do, it like for like our Excel systems use like the raw materials stuff that's updated on like a monthly basis. Is it advisable for us to like update those variables just using like the latest StatCan data, or should we be is it not advisable to be
well, yeah, we can't, unless you have assumptions about what's going to happen for the remaining months of the year. You can do that stuff if you really want to get that deep into it, sure. You can do that through an update command, for example.
Because your information's only updated twice, it would be only updated twice a year, right? So if there's yeah.
Right. So the current year is a forecast. I mean, this year's been amazing, right? With huge swings in commodity prices.
Yeah. So
we saw the metals collapsed and then they recovered, and some of them are flying sky high, and yeah, right. So you could look at these individually. I can give you some tables as well to do that. Yeah. When I give you the model.
Yeah.
Where is it here?
And it's probably a matter of comparing what those results are versus what StatCan's saying up to date, then making some kind of basic assumptions on like adjusting and
sure. Yeah, you can definitely do.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. You could definitely do that if you guys want to take it that far. That's fine. I mean, it's completely up to you. When I give you the Canadian model, I don't have your send off with me right now. But I think I give you the Canadian tables included in the CA folder.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. So in there, you should have a table called prices or something. Where is it? Maybe I think it's the prices-CA table. So what you can do with your model is just switch your working directory to the CA folder, for example, like
Oh,
that.
Look at
And
that.
then, and then you would just open up the cap base and the Provag base in that order. You should be able to then just view those prices, that price table. So that we include this in the forecast table package as well, each round. But again, you can look at, if you guys have strong views on where the commodity prices are going, that kind of stuff in Canadian dollars, then yeah, you can play with all this stuff. You can set these indices, whatever you like to do. It's all up to you, of course. Anything can be imposed with an update command or a whole block of update commands right below these. Same thing with the trading partner growth, right? The RYs are the GDP growth. The RPs is the price inflation. So same stuff. If you don't like our US growth forecast, just throw in an update command right below this read here and set the values that you want it to have.
Right now.
Or inflation. Same thing. The US M&E machinery and equipment investment growth numbers, same thing. So that'll drive your manufacturing sector a little bit. Sorry, that's the motor vehicle one, so that won't touch you guys, but the RIME will. That will drive your aggregate manufacturing equations a little bit. So you can look at the model to see where that is, or I can show you really quickly here. So right in there, it's getting into the fabricated metals, the motor vehicles. I think that M&EMB one's getting into the machinery exports, that kind of stuff. So you can play with that stuff if you think we don't have enough US investment for certain components, that is. Same thing with the US residential construction investment. So, we use a consensus survey from the Philadelphia Federal Reserve Bank for I think about 50 private sector economists in the US, forecasters. And so, but it is a consensus. So you get, as usual, you get a range. So it's trying to come in the middle on where are US housing starts going, that kind of stuff. But the residential construction forecast down there is going to drive your, of course, your wood product demand and things like that, right?
Yeah, something that came up recent especially with exports, like international exports, would be with pharmaceuticals, and that value's been ballooning like crazy, and
exactly, yeah. I
don't know.
So I think that'd be your other chemicals. Is that right? Do I have that right?
That'd probably be like yeah.
Where's my thing? Can't remember what's in here. Pesticides, fertilizers, yeah. So that'd be your other chemical sector, where the pharmaceuticals will be located.
Yeah,
because we would try to isolate it from the high energy users.
Okay.
So right, same concept. Again, same stuff for the European Union. You got your GDP growth, the price inflation, China's growth, Japan, all the stuff I showed you. You can play with exchange rates if you're not happy with those. You want to mess around with the trade weighted exchange rate stuff that I showed you there as well, based on your trading partner shares. What else do we have? That's the US M&E stuff. Is this repeated? Yeah, it is. That's in there twice. It doesn't hurt anything, don't worry. Just redundant code. This is basically all your international components, investment in motor and vehicles, the growth rate on that, U.S. durable consumptions, things like that. And again, the IRC, again, I don't know why that's in there twice as well. But that is where you could make changes to the rest of world environment variables that are exogenously imposed into the system. On the tax variables, same stuff. Most of this stuff is just set at the federal level. I don't know if you need to play with it or you want to play with it. It's you can just look at what they are. These are tax rates on on manufacturers and non-manufacturers. So both 15%. It's just the standard federal rate. Investment tax credits, whether the feds are providing any type of rate reduction, these are zero. The capital consumption allowance on M&E, I mean, this is all statutory stuff, right? So unless you want to assume something, there's probably very little reason to change them. GST rate, that's probably not going anywhere. What else we got? Direct taxes on persons. So this is an effective rate. I believe social insurance payment contribution stuff. Yeah, it's all just sort of federally mandated indicators that you typically won't need to play with. So I think most of this macro is about your exogenous trading partner stuff and your prices. That would probably benefit you guys the most to make any adjustments to. Same stuff here. I mean, you're just talking about old age security contributions, EI. These are transfers, excuse me. So these are basically fixed ratios that come out of the national model, unless you want to play with, you're doing some work on that stuff. Most things are pretty stable and not really in need of adjustment. Same stuff here. So here's your producer prices, whether you want to make adjustments on these. So what these actually come from, and the reason they come from our cap base, is that price model, that cost model I showed you. We also have one at the national level. And when we run our system in an iterative process, which means we'll solve all the provinces and then we solve Canada, and then we go over again and over and over again. That's how our system works until we come to an equilibrium solution for Canada as a whole, where you get basically absolutely no change to maybe 6 decimal places in the dollar values, so to $1. And that's what we do. So we run our system about 40 or 50 times to get to that equilibrium solution. But within the national model is a price model as well. So it takes all this price information coming out of the provincial price models, so that, accounting for all the tax rate changes, energy costs, input usage, all that kind of stuff. And then it computes the producer price index at the national level. And then that is read back from that national model into the province here to get you your PPIs, your producer price indices, for all these different commodity components. So you can view these as well. I believe they should all be in that price table. There's the industry. Yeah, these are them here. These should be your producer price indices right here. So same concept. You're just looking at how much, if you don't like the price growth assumption, you can impose these as well. It's entirely up to you. Now, electric power looks like this is where we're imposing your Manitoba hydro increase of 3.6% effective June 1st, 2018, and then they're looking at 2.5% thereafter, something like that. So looks like we've set it at the note is 3% from there on. So rather than letting that PPI equation work in the model, oops, I have to go right to the top to get to it. Rather than letting that work, we are just estimating it exogenously there in the EX3. And then when we solve the model, I can show you here. Oh, that's the BAM file. 1 second. We exclude it for the entire solution period from 2020 to 28. So we're just saying that electric power prices are already going to be predetermined in this forecast based on what Manitoba Hydro's come out with for their general rate application that they went through, and therefore let's just override the number.
Question: are those exclude lists manually created, or is that generated from the system?
It's generated from the system. It's automated.
Okay,
yeah. We used to do it by hand, but we've made our lives easier here. So when I run our update system, and I may have to build you guys something or write some code for you. If you have to tell me what kind of stuff you're updating. What we have here, we have where is it? Make data sets and exclude lists MN. So after we run our update BAM, which will run through all of our update macros, populate the history all the way up to whatever's available for every single variable. this thing then runs. And all it does, it's pretty simple. It has these macro commands. So it just says, open the model, make the model. If you remember the whole, you probably did this in the tutorial. That's all that is. Choose the model, make it. This is compile. So that's making the model, excuse me. And then under a date range, you make your data set. You may remember that, Thomas, from the tutorial. And then we run these exclude lists. So what this command does, it's a macro command. It goes and it takes the, that's the EQN file. So MN202 EQN. It'll make an LST file called MNList17, and it checks all stochastic variables for the 2017 year. And if the data is known, it will be added, that variable will be added to the list. So we have all these lists here. So MNList17, 18, 19, 20. And you open up 17, and it's obviously a giant list because we pretty much know everything for 17. When you open up, as you get to the 19, well, it's still pretty big, but the list gets smaller and smaller. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
As you go forward, as less information is known. So that's the idea.
All coming back to me now. I feel like we used to take our own estimates, like for the first year out, as well as we would use our population estimates, and those would be part of the exclude lists.
Okay. Yeah.
It's all kind of coming back to me now. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you can put them in manually. The danger, you can't. The problem with what you guys do, giving it, what's good for us is that we run the update system on a clean database, right? Yeah. We recreate that database from scratch when we run our update system. So there will be nothing beyond what's been updated, right? So if the LFS is updated 2020, 21 and on is all going to be blank. That way, these lists aren't a problem. But if you start running EX macros, for example, and imposing values, you know what I mean? You can get a mess up in those lists. They can be made improperly. So we can talk about that later. I think otherwise you're left to adding. Say you updated the prices in 2020, you're going to have to add them in here by hand. Okay. In the 2020 do not solve list. That is. Okay. Let me just close some of these files. I'm going to have way too much stuff open. Okay, and that's the end of the EX, or no, not there, sorry. A couple more. All right, yeah, the final stuff we're reading in here is really just interest rates, CPI, Canadian CPI. So what we got for the consumer price index on a national level, what we got for the Canadian GDP deflator out of running our system, that is. We got the 10-year Canada bond, 10-year plus Canada bond rate. So the long bonds, short bonds, benchmarked by the T-bill, 3-month T-bill rate. This is a population ratio that just comes out of the Canada model. I can't remember what that's for, but you're not going to play with it, so don't worry. Again, looking at our national unemployment rate, so just reading in as much data. So this is the URCA is about looking at those relative labor market tightness equations, right? That I showed you earlier compared to the normal rate, that kind of stuff. And then we just have some more federal tax stuff. I believe, what is this one again? I'll have to look it up. I can't quite remember that variable. So then we have our federal immigration level. Also employment, labor force, the unemployment rate. And then we also compute here the unemployment rate, well, the normal as well, outside of Manitoba. So what this is doing, it's computing the unemployment rate in all other provinces, excluding your province. And that's so that we can look at relative labor market differences across the country. So you'll see that it adds these all up, and then you can read the code, but that's all this is really doing here. Computing the labor market gap, so the deviation in Manitoba's normal rate relative to the country as a whole. bunch of stuff being computed in here. What else do we have? Here's your trading, the rest of Canada GDP growth. So there's Canada as a whole, and we put the CAMN because it's excluding Manitoba in it. So you will not find Manitoba in that. And same thing with your, so this is about getting your interprovincial trade drivers here. So we're getting the investment in machinery and equipment outside of your province, the investment in residential construction outside of your province, and durable purchases, things like that. The RXSs, so these are your trading partner share stuff. So unless you have views on China picking up a larger share or the US bouncing back, that kind of stuff, we tend to just extend the last known value forward in this case over the forecast period for all trading partners, including the rest of Canada.
So is that based on IO?
Nope, this is Strategis data, so the Industry Canada data.
Industry Canada, okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so it's, where am I here?
Yeah.
Right, it's just that trade share stuff I showed you, so you can get it back to 92.
Yeah, I find the trade shares for 2019 will not be reflective of what's happening in 2020.
Maybe not, yeah, that's right.
There were some issues with China and such, and certain commodities. So I would probably want to adjust that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you could definitely play. See, that's the thing about 2020. We've sort of hand-tuned the forecast anyways. So this, given that we only know 19 is our last value, that would assume that things go back to normal next year, right? You'd have a sort of a return to your shares, but of course, you guys can look at that and see what you think.
And then again, something like pharmaceutical exports within there, it's about twice as large as what we see within the provincial economic accounts.
Is that right?
So,
wow.
Yeah, so it's about 2.4 billion, I think, in 2019.
Wow.
But it's only 1.2 within national accounts. So
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, something needs revising.
So it's that whole customs data versus what's happening within reality here.
Yes, right.
So that's made quite apparent with drugs. Neither here nor there.
I believe it. So everything's a mess. Well, it was an interesting year to be training you on how to use the model for forecasting. So you say, "Oh, go and adjust everything, guys. Don't let the equations do anything, and it's all up to you. And collect as much information as possible, because that's what we've been up to."
Aaron, I had a question.
Yes.
So as you're going through the macros here, and you've shown us how to update some of the variables here with alternative or newer information.
Yes.
One thing that I'm cognizant of, I've been forewarned that we should be careful not to kind of mix up our laundry, and make sure that if you are updating some of the files that you are documenting that, so you can go back to the original if need be. So are you going to be going into that tomorrow a little bit? Like, I'm just wondering, if we were to update a macro file and then to save it, should we be saving that as a different file name? And if you're running macros, or if you're running a batch file, like, how would that work?
Right. Yeah. No. If you are going to do that, I mean, for one, you'll always have a copy of the model that we sent you in the cloud, right? So you can just re-download the system again. Best practices is what you're talking about for how you guys want to update and replace, put in new information, new data into the model. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. And then maybe I can work on something this evening to set you up the best way possible. So it really comes down to, like, what are you guys up to, right? I don't know. I didn't know off the bat. I know you guys like to do demographics. That's always been the case in the past, as I recall. But you'll have to really, we can always work on it on a case by case basis, and we can give you suggestions there. It's we're very good at this, and we can do this very efficiently. So I could fix this for you in house. I could tell you how to do it over an email. It's I don't think it's a major issue about what you got to watch out for. I think you just write us an email, tell us what you want to do, particularly if anything new comes up, and we can sort you out very quickly. It's not a big concern for myself, at least. But yeah, you're right. If you do want to start imposing things, I would recommend possibly renaming the macros. You could then, if you were to do that, for example, you could then just go in and modify the BAM file. Sorry, I'm in the Canadian model now.
Okay.
Let's get that closed. So, or you could even make a new ASOL. That might be your best bet. So the ASOL is typically what we run. So looking at this again, this is the one that runs all of your exogenous macros and then solves the system. So you could make a copy of this. You could make names for this, call it like new, whatever you want to do. So you were just modifying.
Yeah, that's fairly straightforward. Yeah.
Yeah, and then same with the BAM file. Same thing. Just rename the BAM and then know to run that BAM and not the other BAM. That's all you'd have to do. It's very, very easy to control for these issues.
Yeah.
But yeah, like don't be afraid to bother us and just ask any questions if you're not sure about what you're up to, because that's what we're here for.
Awesome.
I think a lot of the things that we'd want to do is any type of potential government policy changes. I mean, whether it's changing a tax like that PST or something, or there was the talks of phasing out the education tax on people's properties over like a 10-year period. So we would kind of feather that into the system.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So we can definitely do the PST shock tomorrow. We can play with that one. The education tax one is definitely more complicated because that's under your other indirect taxes component. So this kind of goes back to that conversation about liquor and all that sort of stuff. We need a base, right, to run off of. So again, we have done this in the past, but you guys will have some homework to do first before we implement that type of stuff into the model. And whether you want to share that with us, it's obviously up to you as well. But there's a lot of if you know what you're doing, you guys can do it all by yourselves, right? It's just you need to understand what the concepts are here, taxable proportions, effective tax rates. How is the effective tax rate changed on other indirect taxes when I change education taxes? Like what component of that revenue is education taxes or sorry, property taxes for, right? That type of stuff. So that's the point. You need to figure out how it changes the effective rate, because that's what a model like this deals with. It deals with an effective rate and not individual taxes, because we don't have the tax base to deal with those. But the guys, in finance should be able to do it. I know you are in finance, but you know what I mean. Whoever's in your tax department should be able to do that kind of stuff for you.
It seems like more and more eyes are kind of looking at us these days. So
okay.
Yeah.
Well, we can definitely provide a little course on that someday as a separate little sideshow, maybe. I can tell you what we've done in the past with some guys. You just have to tell me exactly what you want to do, and if it's strictly an education tax analysis, it's just because this stuff gets complicated. It's just not something you can just flip a switch in a model.
Yeah, what I would like to do, Aaron, if you guys are open to this as well, once we've established kind of a base level knowledge of how to use the model, that we could potentially organize a subsequent workshop to this one that kind of builds on some of those learnings.
Sure. Yeah.
That would be next year sometime. I don't know.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine with me. Yeah. Right. Just so you guys let me know what you're up to and what you're what you're using the model for in detail, and we can hopefully develop something around those topics.
Okay. Okay. The rest of this stuff is just cost indices. You don't need to be playing with these ones. A little bit more on the price side.
So again, coal, oil, gas, you don't need to adjust these because you'd adjust the price above on many of these components. So nothing really relevant here for you. Okay, so what you will be using the most, I would tell you, is the EX1, the 2, and the 4 macros to produce a forecast. Now the 4 macro, EX4 is the, oh geez, we're at end time here.
Yeah, we could pick this up tomorrow morning if you prefer to, Aaron.
Sure. Yeah, I think that'd be good. You know, we'll fly through this. There's not much left to show you here. A few more macros. We'll run the system, and then we can move into tuning your forecast, maybe order of operations tomorrow morning, and then start looking at the major project system and running some shocks and things like that afterwards. So
okay,
we made some pretty good progress here today, I think.
So.
Okay, so you guys all worn out?
No, I'm gonna work the rest of the evening out. All the stuff that I needed to do today, I gotta do tonight.
So, right, okay.
I don't know. Just kidding. I'm not sure. I don't know. We go for a run now or something. Yeah.
But yeah, no, that was very informative.
Yeah,
Thank
really
you, Aaron.
good.
I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to tomorrow.
Okay, great.
This is a dumb question, but do you ever like look at what the other private sector forecasters are putting out and just kind of like
yes,
or kind of like, what are you saying type of thing? Like do you guys kind of like talk? Like, do you talk to conference board? Do you talk to like the other banks and be like, oh, you guys are doing this wrong, or does it go back and forth sometimes? Just curious. You know.
We do not talk to them. No, conference board is a competitor of ours.
Okay.
So we don't talk to them. I sit on some finance ministers, recommendation group councils and things like that with their people. So I know them all quite well. But conference board, I hear this a lot, that they've been putting out some crazy stuff. A lot of people are misguided by some of their forecasts. But then on the bank side of things, they don't have models. The banks use spreadsheets. And more importantly, they use top-down models. So they set where growth's going to be, and then they allocate it, if they allocate it, right?
Yeah.
They don't have components.
Yeah.
Some of their forecasters, they don't get into the nitty-gritty on the labor market stuff, and the numbers don't make sense. We've seen, not looking at participation rate, all kinds of factors, right? I mean, it's just we that's the thing about being bottom-up modelers. We're forced to deal with the minor details, and yeah, you're right. Once a lot of the forecasts tend to not look correct in any way in some cases. So.
Like when I look at the average of private sector forecasters information that was circulated 2 weeks ago, the range in real GDP for 2020, it's like over 3%.
I know.
Over 3%. I'm just like, does anybody know? Or like,
well, that's because Oxford's had like a -10, I think, at one point. I have the survey. We publish our stuff on Consensus Economics, if you've heard of them, and they have everybody there. But yeah, some of these guys are looking for some type of media hit or something like that, showing just doom and gloom.
Yeah,
numbers have rebounded quite well in some places.
But bad publicity is still publicity, I guess.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. Our job is to get it right, not to
trying here, but
we try not to create drama.
Yeah, I feel like that there's less pressure to be close, because especially for 2020, before, if you were off by by a consensus by like 0.2%, people would be like, "What are you doing?" But now it's just like, I don't know, like if you're off by somebody else by like 1%, I mean,
right.
It's kind of a weird year, so you could just like throw darts at a dartboard and probably be just as.
Yeah, well, I go around the country. I get asked, "Why are you different than so and so?" And I say, "I don't know." So they don't ever present any of their assumptions.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
What do you want me to say, right?
Yeah, yeah.
They don't have the components. Don't have the detail.
I know my method. I don't know theirs. I could explain mine, and why don't you go ask them?
Right, and they won't have an answer.
Exactly. So, I don't know. It's been good. This has been quite informative. It's nice to get this refresher again. So, looking forward to diving in and not changing things too much.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and this is going to be helpful, especially for Thomas, because this is my third time seeing this particular course. So it's unfortunate that you like. Do you miss going on like little trips to places to like do these dog and pony shows, or do you find it's easier to do it from home? Because I know that you have like a young family, right?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. You know, I used to love traveling.
Yeah.
But, now it just causes trouble in some cases. So.
Okay, so it's probably easier to just do it from home, and then you could kind of shut it down, or at least always be around. So.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's not too bad this year, right?
Okay.
Because you're right. I am a homebody now, so it doesn't really matter that much for me.
Yeah.
Right.
Good.
But yeah, hopefully we'll get on the road again someday, maybe 2 years from now. So.
Yeah, a couple of years. Yeah. So
Get
I don't know.
A bubble suit to wear, some type of hazmat outfit for the plane.
The bubble boy, like from Seinfeld. Yeah.
There you go.
Neither here nor there, but yeah. I don't know if if there's nothing else really, you could just call it the meeting adjourned, I guess, and
okay.
I don't know. Take
it up sounds good.
Tomorrow, 8:30. I might be a few minutes late into the call tomorrow, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, you know this stuff well. I'm just going to be walking through those last few macros, and then we'll get into I'll just run the system for you, and then we'll go into the project stuff.
For sure.
Okay.
Awesome.
Okay, we'll resume tomorrow morning. Take care, guys. Have a good night.
Great evening.
Okay,
guys.
thanks.
Morning.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.